So speaking of which, I'm curious, Dennis, because I feel like there was at least a big discussion of if students are allowed if back on campus, right? If the university goes online for the fall semester, should players be allowed to come back on campus? To me, it almost makes sense for that to happen. Like, wouldn't it be safer if the school wants college football to resume and resume safely, like you said, right? There's no real way to guarantee or ensure that these players aren't intermingling with other students, even just going to class or just like you said, if they're going to the bar or going to the party, that where they can get sick and then spread it to their team and shut it down. Wouldn't it make more sense for these universities to actually be online for the fall and just allow athletes to come back to kind of quarantine them theoretically as much as possible?
I think that's one way of looking at it. Every university is different. I mean, if you look at it from the financial standpoint, these presidents, I would say in general across the country, are desperate for butts to be in seats, not in the stands, in the classroom. Before this hit, there was a general downturn in enrollment in college, which was causing some financial distress at these schools. I mean, we're talking about dorms, housing, meal plans that these students pay for. Even something that sounds insignificant is parking, which is huge on a lot of campuses. That's income coming in to a budget of, I think, out of what was it at Michigan? I think the budget was $5 billion or something like that for the entire school, and athletics was 185 million. So no, they desperately need these students on campus. Now, yeah, the stakeholders, the president's been all over the map on this. First, it was no students, no football. That was the word to Mike Pence when the commissioners met with him over the phone. And then it kind of softened. Well, maybe we can have this hybrid thing where we have some online, some maybe they're in their dorms taking on. I'm just saying from a financial standpoint, to these schools, they have to be on campus if they can safely.
It's a good point. I didn't think about it that way. You're right. It would be definitely safer for the students if they weren't. But I see you're right. Obviously, we're locked in on the football aspect of financial how important it is. But you're right. Butts in the seats in the classroom is just as important for these overall universities. Dennis, I'm curious. So last week you wrote an article about if the season was to go on in 2020, how it would be different. You listed a ton of different ways that we can expect 2020 to be different, from safety precautions to maybe how coaches go about meetings and maybe only being on Zoom, like you said, interacting with the players that are at risk. One of the things you noted that would be different, and I'm curious about this, is the need for safety to actually trump winning, right? You put out there that maybe it's separating the team to where if one group gets sick, the backups can still stay healthy to play on that game. So I'm curious, do you actually believe that schools will put safety first at the cost maybe of trying to win a game?
Boy, that's really complicated because, I quoted a medical professional at Arizona who's been a trainer there for 25 years, and he's their head medical officer, I think now. Not a team doctor, but head medical officer is his title. And he's the one that came up with that he said the emphasis has to be on not necessarily winning games, but getting 120 guys through the season safely and healthy. Now, at what point is that trumped by, a coach trying to win games? Well, every day you would think. It's just fascinating how they're going to try to do this. I mean, he painted a picture where, this is the largest team sport. I said 120 guys, where you're going to have to try to keep them apart in a perfect world until the ball is snapped on Saturday. As best you can. Separate the first and second team offensive lines. So if one guy or all five guys get sick, then you can plug somebody in there without a moment's notice. Is it an ideal thing your second string offensive line is starting? Absolutely not, but at least you're playing. You know what I mean?
Right.
So that's the kind of thing from the health care standpoint they're thinking about, and it takes the coaches to buy in.
It's a tough buying, especially in the pressure cooker that is college sports, like you said, with so little games and so much pressure on all these coaches every single week. Like you said, it's a spot I don't envy. I know a lot of people, say, "Oh man, I'd love to be a college football coach," but this is a scenario where, like you said, right, when you have to put safety, basically almost measure in some instances safety over winning. It's a tough spot to put some of these coaches in for sure. We're talking with Dennis Dodd, CBS Sports college football reporter. Dennis, I'm curious. So last week, obviously we're going to get way in here and assume at least college football can resume safely for the most part. Ohio State Athletic Director Gene Smith basically said last week, Ohio State, he believes at some point this year they could host up to 50,000 fans for a game. So I'm going to ask about, the viability of that, because I think obviously each state's going to be different. But I'm curious about this aspect. if some states are allowing fans, right? We see the South especially are opening up and loosening regulations more than other parts of the country, more than California, more than the Northeast. So I'm curious, if fans are allowed in stands and it's safe in some states, how do you think it's going to be regulated? Like, is it going to be a state-by-state basis? So Ohio State, let's say, can have fans for their game, but Penn State can't. Do you think that is there going to be any sort of regulation there, or it's literally going to be state-by-state, and really the state governments are going to be the ones that allow fans in the stands or not?
Yeah, that's not really a concern to me. I think that's up to the health professionals and governors
Okay.
of each state. Whether somebody has a quote unquote advantage because they have 10,000 people in the stadium isn't a big deal to me. More to my point is I'm wondering how Gene Smith got there. How did we go in the course of a few hours on Saturday or on last week on a conference call? He kind of surprised people by saying, yeah, we might be able to get 22,000 in there. And by the end of the day, he was saying 50,000, where the day before it wasn't even a consideration. First of all, how did we get there? Because I know other schools are modeling this. How did we get there? And then the second question is, and probably the biggest for the people that follow the sport, who gets those tickets?
That's
if less than 1 out of 2 people that go to games at Ohio State are allowed in at 50,000. Boy, who gets those tickets? Now, Jack Swarbrick at Notre Dame, he's a proponent of this. He wants students in the stands. Doesn't mean he would necessarily support it, but he wants them in the stands. He said the first tickets would go to the students, and that seems fair. They're the ones paying the tuition to go to school, supporting the team. They're the legacy givers who are going to be there in 20 years contributing to the cause. But you know what I'm talking about. That seems to be the case. But if you're a big time, it's not going to be 50,000 everywhere. Let's say it's 10,000 or 5,000. Those boosters are going to be putting a lot of pressure on those ADs to get in there, to be part of it. It's going to be a unique circumstance. So I think that may be the next story I'm working on. That's going to be a lot of pressure on people.
There's going to be a lot of emails, Dennis, I'm sure, going to, like you said,
Yes.
Those booster funds, and those ADs are going to be, their inboxes will be flooded with, this is how much I don't forget, I gave you a few years back. I supported you, maybe scratch my back here this time.
They're simply buying their way in the moment. Who knows?
That's, I'm sure that the ADs and the schools won't turn that down for sure, especially now. Wrapping up here with Dennis. Dennis, I have 2 quick questions for you here. So number one, do you think college football, after all this going on, do they need a commissioner type to kind of run college football? You obviously have Mark Emmert with the NCAA running college basketball. But now when you kind of leave it up to conference or even by states, where some states, like I said, there's basically regulations are all different of when they can practice, if fans are in the state, all the different regulations. Does college football need a commissioner, or do you like the way it's run right now?
Well, they do, but it'll never happen.
Okay.
Because think about this. We can't. These commissioners can't even agree on the number of conference games that should be played.
That's a good point.
Some have 9. There's one. If you're the Big Ten and you're taking in $55 million a year with your Big Ten network and media rights contract, you want somebody telling you what to do. No, you want to swing a big stick. Same in the SEC. In other words, if there was a commissioner right now, do any of these guys, I'm not saying it would be wrong or right, but do you want anybody telling you how many people you can have in the stands and when you can come back? Absolutely not. I mean, that's why it was ludicrous a couple of weeks ago when Mark Emmert, those big headlines crawl at the bottom of the screen. Mark Emmert, NCAA will not mandate a return to play. And my first thought was, you know what? Because he can't.
Right.
Because he has no power in doing this. These guys are going to come back when they want. The NCAA can issue all the kind of medical guidelines it wants to, but that's all they are. They're best practices, they're guidelines, because they can't be enforced, and if they aren't enforced, they can't be penalized. So it's best practices. It's like just a white paper going out there. We suggest you do these things. So no, it'll never happen unless maybe there's a Power 5 breakaway and they have one person representing them, but not now.
All right, and I want to finish with Dennis, and not coronavirus related or starting the season related at all. But another rule that's kind of really polarizing the sport is name, image, and likeness. The NCAA is going to vote on it in January of 2021. And I feel like for the most part, everyone is behind it except those actually in the game, athletic directors, coaches. And now you had Reggie Bush come out over the weekend and basically say that name, image, likeness could, quote, destroy some people. I'm just curious, Dennis, why does everyone that's against it view name, image, likeness, and students, or I should say athletes, getting paid or getting, I should say, benefits because of who they are, because of the success on the field, how come everyone assumes like this is going to be doomsday, this is going to be the worst case scenario, when every other person in college, every other person in America can profit off of their name and their skills, except for college football and college athletes? Why does everyone think this is like a doomsday scenario if this was to go through?
Well, I think first of all, a lot of athletic directors are either agree with it or resign that it's going to happen. So I wouldn't say everybody.
Okay, that's fair.
The other point is that as humans, we're afraid of the unknown. You know, it's really nice to be in this nice little cocoon that we've been in for 105 years or 110 years with the NCAA, where they just kind of move the goalpost depending on what amateurism means to them. Well, here's why it scares a lot of people. When we go to this model, and it's going to happen, there's going to be some form of name, image, and likeness where kids can earn money off their athletic talents. Let's be clear here. You know, so there's going to be some social media, but they wouldn't be on social media with all those followers without their athletic talents. So that, in effect, professionalizes them. All right, I don't have a problem with that. You know, I think that the NCAA amateur model is outdated. Okay, so then how do we deal with that? And that's the big question. You know, the big question out there, the big hurdle is, what about recruiting? And the NCAA basically is going to Congress to try to get an antitrust exemption so they can try to cap those numbers to try to rein in recruiting or try to have some kind of clearinghouse. Because then anything that hints of the NCAA trying to limit what these players can earn is going to be met with a lawsuit. Since 2014, they've been found in violation of Sherman antitrust twice. That's why we're here with O'Bannon. That's why we're here with cost of attendance. That's why we're here with NIL. And that's why we're here with people now raising the question, you know, if the players are able to earn money and the NCAA is an amateur organization, what is the NCAA doing anyway? You know, besides setting play and practice rules and doing enforcement, it's a lot of people that disagree with anyway.
Dennis Dodd, CBS Sports college football reporter. Dennis, thank you so much for a few minutes here. I really do appreciate it. Hopefully you can enjoy your Memorial Day, find a barbecue pit somewhere, and make the most of the day. Thanks again for the time. Really do appreciate it.
Yeah, there aren't many beaches in Kansas, Ryan, so it'll be hard. All right, thanks, man.